Roll and Roll. This is a heavy roll and write game, which is an unusual thing. Roll and write game until yesterday used to be on the light side of things. So at the beginning I was very happy and proud. Oh, look at my roll and write game. They're all grown up now. Then I play Roll and Roll, and well, there are many things in this game that unfortunately are not to my liking. I'll give you a general overview of the game and then I'll tell you why. Unfortunately, this is not the heavy roll and write game that I was hoping for. The theme: players control patricians in ancient Rome, and they are rebuilding Rome after a fire, and also they're trying to expand the empire, take control of colonies, and renovate the roads to get to those colonies. Doing all these things will score you points, and at the end of the game, the player with the most points wins the game. We have a board representing Rome, but we'll see that later. First, we'll look at the personal board. Each player has one, and it is used to keep track of resources and other things. It's a dry erase kind of board, and so then you have dry erase kind of markers. Each player will have one that is also color-coded, so it goes together with two meeples, one that you will place on the building cards that you build, and one that is in Rome and moves around and tells you where you can build next. Here we have a section where you will mark your resources. You already start with resources, and it's interesting that different players will have different boards. Well, that is obvious, but what is interesting is that different boards will have different allies, different abilities, different starting resources, variety there. And so Patricia starts with a wood and a brick, and then after a while maybe she gains more brick, more wood, a fish, more wood, another brick, jewelry, etc., etc., etc. So you mark here with a letter the resources that you acquire. When you spend them, you cross them out. Suppose that she takes the action that allows you to trade 3 of the same kind of resource for coins, and then when you spend a resource, you mark it that way. And then maybe later she uses 2 brick and a wood to build a building. And then there's fish here. So as you can see, after a while, it gets really, really messy. For example, just I was giving you this example, I forgot that it was a wood there. So it's actually pretty inefficient way of keeping track of resources, and not something that requires a roll and draw dry erase marker kind of situation. Very important part of the player aid to remind you of the actions, especially the construct actions. You can see has many steps. Then here tracks where you keep track of the coins that you gained, legacy for renovating roads, buildings that you built. You mark one for each building that you built, glory that you acquire by conquering places in colonies. And when you mark the area under one of these blue boxes, you acquire a Nero card. They're placed in descending order of value. When you get the one on top, of course, because what are you, silly? Of course you want to get the best value. When the last Nero card is assigned, that triggers the end of the game, and at that point you toss the salad that you have been building the entire game. I'm referring, of course, to the point salad, because this game definitely fits that category. And so you score all of these things, and the player with the highest score wins the game. But back to the things you keep track of, you can acquire senators that will support you. You can acquire legions. When you acquire a legion, again, you underline to indicate that you have it there. Then when you spend it to take control of locations, you remove one for each location that you just conquered, because you leave them behind as garrison. So basically the ones that are available is called ungarrisoned. Then you have a number of advisors or allies that you can acquire during the game. By spending resources, you may cancel, now you may fill in those dots, and when a section is filled up, then you acquire the corresponding benefit. You don't have to fill a section entirely before you start another one. Right now I have this ability. Hooray! If you fill all of those sections under a single advisor, then you get the corresponding ingredient for your point salad. That is some extra points at the end of the game. But again, very important during the game what you're doing there. So, and then we have Rome, the eternal city that just got burned down. So it's eternal because we are remaking it. So we have the board with the Forum Romanum in the center and the possible areas where we're going to start colonies soon. These roads count as not renovated yet, and these location as not conquered yet. Around Rome, we're going to have a number of blueprints representing different types of buildings that the players can build during the game. They're always going to be the same combination, say 2 military, 1 leisure, 2 manufacturing, and so on and so forth. But there are multiple options, so multiple army buildings from which 2 can be selected or randomly drawn, multiple leisure, multiple manufacturing, multiple urban, and only 1 religious, always the shrine. That's the only one with no variety. So there's going to be a lot of variety there. The buildings will tell you the shape in which the building will be, the resources you need to spend to build it, possible restrictions, say the garden needs to be entirely on a hill and not next to the Servian wall, which is this line here, and then victory points that they will score you at the end of the game, depending on themselves, and sometimes just themselves, sometimes on where they are next to other things. Possible other effects, say military buildings have that icon there that is triggered by a corresponding icon on a die, and that allow you to gain legions, and possibly also other resources such as stone, or spend stone to turn them into legions. You're sort of like friggin' reverse Medusa there, and other production abilities, and so on and so forth. Now, what the heck are we gonna do? We're gonna use these like nice dice with a lot of symbols, so the type and number, so how many of each color we use, depends on the number of players. The idea is that you will always have 2 dice per players plus 1. So each round you roll the dice, and then starting with the first player who has the school card here, that player will take a die and the other player will take another die, and then basically you will continue like this until each player has 2 dice and 1 is left behind. That one is not used. Then players will start using their dice, basically taking an action every time. When they take turns spending a die. Some actions require a specific die, some other actions do not require a specific die, but you still need to discard one. So that gives players 2 main actions each turn, with the exception of free actions, you can take multiple ones. These are the actions. Again, this part of the player aid will be your friend for the game. The most involved of them all is the construct action, and it's also the most important because without that one, a lot of other things are not available. So you have an overseer there. Remember, you will be able to build only adjacent to your overseer. So at the beginning, it has to be adjacent to the Forum Romanum. If there are buildings drawn on the board already, you can jump from building to building until you reach an area where sitting in a building you're next to unbuilt locations, then you can build there. But the overseer will always jump from building to building. The Forum Romanum counts as a building. The first building that you move into to reach an area where you can build is for free. Further buildings, you need to give them fish because they really love sushi, and they're never gonna walk into 2 buildings the same day unless they get a portion of sushi for each building past the first. You move your overseer. Then you draw a new building adjacent to your overseer from an available blueprint. Those blueprints may or may not be available. If somebody just built one of those buildings, there's going to be one of the meeples there, and that makes it unavailable. So if you're using this icon here, it's not good enough. This one only allows you to build available buildings. If you're using the icon with the triangle, the architect of the Freemasons, then actually you can build also an unavailable building. So after you build a building, suppose I build that one, my thing goes there, which makes it not available to the builders with the hammer. So sad, builders with the hammer. And as a reminder that to construct, I need one of those two symbols. Again, this one being better than that one. So I'm ready to build it. Once I build it, then I move my overseer into the next building. I also need to spend resources to do so. Let's get more up close for an example. Suppose that I decide to build the woodcutter. It doesn't have specific restrictions about where it needs to go. So I take my marker, I spend those resources, which may come from the die that I'm just spending. So I'm using this one for its symbol. It's available. I have these two resources, and that's just it. In case I don't have enough resources on that die, I can supplement them from resources from my personal player right here. I had the resources from the die, so they can come from the die and or from your personal resource. I build the building of that shape there and decide I want to build it there, like so. There you go. You can see how nice it is. And then I put letters in it to indicate that that's a woodcutter. And then I move my overseer there. And suppose then later another player decides to build something else. They decide to build a garden and they want to build it here. That's the shape of the garden. They place the GD letters there, then they place their meeple there. So as you can see, these letters are hard enough to see, and depending on the position, sometimes then the meeple sits on top of those. And just, you don't see them very well. They're very hard to see. And that can be pretty frustrating. Now, after you build the building, you move the overseer to the new building. Next, what else happens? You score one building, so you draw a line under the next available space here on your building track. Then you trigger any lightning bolt effect that may be on the building. You trigger the production value of adjacent buildings, which can be good for you if you kind of chain off the abilities. And you gain the support of a senator if it's building adjacent to one or more of the opponent's buildings. That's for the construct action. Raise Legion, unavailable unless there is a military building. Then you spend that symbol and you activate the Legion ability of up to 3 army buildings, the ones that I showed you, where you just raise legions or you act as reverse Medusa. For each opponent buildings that you activate that way, the owner gains a coin. Thank you very much, my friend, for building regions in my army building. If you have legions, then you can conquer. It doesn't require any specific die. You just have to spend a die or whatever. Then you look at these colonies here, these possible colonies here at the bottom. Suppose I want to go to Hispania. And starting from the road that comes from Rome, all roads go back there, so also roads depart from Rome. Have you ever thought about that? Maybe not. So starting from that one, I need to have enough ungarrison legions to cover the number on at least the next location. And so, for example, I have enough ungarrison one, and I leave one behind. I took control of that one. You see it had a single flag there, so I gain a glory. Suppose that I had enough ungarrison to also get to the next one, then you can get multiple conquest in a single turn for a single action as long as you have enough to cover for those. And that's for the conquer action. However, and that's for the conquer action. Then more stuff going on. Expand. You can do it only after some region, some locations in colonies have been conquered. Because to expand, you renovate roads to conquer. So for 1 stone for each road, you will color that road, and you will score the corresponding number of legacy points indicated there. And for span, you need a hammer and you need to spend stone, again, from dice and or from your personal supply here. Tax. All your connected settlement connected to Rome for the first time, it generates the region's resource for its owner. Each region has a resource, so every time you connect a location in that region to Rome for the first time, in this case, for example, they will produce fish. Tax. All of your connected settlements in one region generate the region's resource, and so, I have 2 connected areas, so that gives me 2 fish if I take that action, which does not require a specific die. Trade. I can spend any 3 matching resources, jury is a wild one, to gain 3 coins. If the die that I'm using, and there's no required die, but if the die that I'm using has that symbol, then I get to score an extra coin for each jewelry. All players may trigger the production ability of one of their buildings as I do so. And then the free action, you have the free action of spending, gained, not stored, so they come from your dice, not from your personal storage. You can spend these resources to mark these spaces here, and again, activate the abilities that you see here and build towards yet another ingredient in your point salad. These are the main points. There's more stuff, but I think that gives you a sense of what's going on. And once the game is over, again, you score points for everything. I'm surprised there isn't a point for just showing up. I like when you go to business meetings and there are donuts just for showing up. Those were the good old days before Zoom meetings. But I digress. Score points for all of the stuff. Play with the highest score wins the game. I love roll and draw games, and usually they're simple. I was not disappointed, quite the opposite. I was excited when I saw that this one was a lot meatier. Oh, finally, the genre is now elevated to the next level. But is it? Because, of course, you can turn any game into a roll and draw game, but maybe that's not a great idea. This is a game that I don't think should have been a roll and draw. Nothing that you do in which you're drawing really enhances the game, makes it more playable, more fun, more practical, more efficient. It's not like cartographers. At the end you have a fun, nice looking map. You have the pleasure of drawing. Everything that you do in which you're drawing, writing, actually makes the game more complicated. Those resources are going to get scattered in all over the place in a mess of things that you crossed out, and the other letters are who knows where they are. Those buildings are hard to see, and after you draw it with the orange things, you're going to put a meeple right on top of it so you do not see that code. It would have just been a better game if you had tiles representing different kinds of buildings and different kind of resources. I honestly do not understand why they had to turn it into a roll and draw. Again, those allies, you put tokens to fill up those spaces, and when you have tokens, you score the points, you get those ability. And honestly, that is no small element, because to me that really detracts from the experience of the game. And it's too complicated. I wanted to play with my daughters. Oh, roll and draw. I can definitely roll and draw, roll and write. I can play with my daughters. The game is too complicated for that. I didn't feel like learning the AI that also seemed particularly feeling complicated, so I just played multiple players at the best of my possibility. That means that I was just looking at the board right there, and I could just go there and check how many stones are on that road, how many flags are on that colony, and which building is this. If I was playing against other people, and so I was looking at a distance from the board, I would constantly have to lean over and go there. Being just me, I was right there next to the action. I think it would have been very annoying. I think the logistics of the game, in which you draw on the board and it's hard to see, and there are meeples covering important codes, just makes it very frustrating. If the game had been designed with tokens and buildings instead of roll and draw, you wouldn't have that problem. But I still don't know that I would love it. Maybe I do again like a nice meaty Euro with the dice, with dice-based action. I played a game recently. Was it Era, the Middle Ages, in which you roll the dice and you also build a city again using plastic buildings. That was fun. But the point is, after if I was playing it again with the best possible mechanics and components, the game still would feel too much of a point salad. Maybe I'm getting old and grumpy. 10 years ago, I played games like Trajan in which you score points for anything you do, and I liked it. Now I don't like it anymore because I get the sense that everything that I do is good enough, but I don't really get a sense of like, oh, this is a dominant strategy. It's a strong path. This is a nice way of chaining things off. I just get the sense I'm always doing something that's good enough. I don't get the sense that a strategy is truly rewarded over another. It probably is, but it just doesn't feel the way. It feels bland because all actions more or less feel good enough. And I scored 3 points, and the other side scored 4, and then I scored 5, and the other side again scores 4. Just one more, 2 more. So it just feels a little bit not flavorful enough because every element of the design kind of like tastes the same. It also takes a while to get started because early on you have all of these options, but really until legions are available, you're just building things in Rome. Then people can start rushing to fill those roads and do all of those other things. But the point is this: everything in the game kind of feels the same. It almost feels like it's a machine that has like 12 buttons, and depending on which one you press, there'll be a light that goes on, and it's a slightly different nuance, slightly lighter, slightly darker, slightly or more on the orange side, slightly more on the light orange side. You're doing all of these things, all this procedure with these dice, and thinks about all these things, how to use them, and it just feels you're always going back to the same idea, trade this and get that. Did I mention I didn't enjoy it all that much because of the production? And again, maybe once the production doesn't get in the way of gameplay, my impression of gameplay would be a little more positive. But as of now, it feels somehow a lot of work for not much. Like a musical score with a lot of notes, and yet the music is kind of like samey. A recipe with 100,000 ingredients, and yet it still kind of tastes like tofu. And it sounds a little bit brutal, but that's all I can be. I can only be honest in my reviews. I have no incentive not to tell you what I think and not to describe how I feel about a game. And I feel that this game is a lot of work really for not a particularly exciting or interesting experience. All of this made a lot worse by roll and draw mechanics that really have no place in this specific design. And this one, alas, is my assessment for Rome and Roll.